Dr. Marty, I am so glad that you're at the FDA now.
My goal is to create a new FDA that's modern, efficient, and focused on healthy food. There was so much broken at the agency. The predecessor said in the Biden administration that his number one goal was to fight misinformation. Well, my number one goal is not to censor Americans. It's to deliver more cures for the American public and healthier food for children.
They pay less in Europe than in America for an American drug. Can you explain that to me?
It cannot be explained. We have a bold mandate, and I'll tell you the cool thing about working for President Trump is he tells you to go bold, do what's right, and don't worry about the lobbyists and the corporate interests. And I don't think anybody has ever been in government with a charge like that.
Dr. Marty, I usually go into people's stories, and I know my audience really loves to get to know my guests, but we've already done that. So I just want to give a shout out to the Real Talk interview we had from before you were nominated and before you were confirmed. And so I'm just going to start with congratulations. I am so glad that you're at the FDA now.
Thank you so much, Marissa. Yeah, that interview was right before I think I got nominated for FDA. So it's been an incredible ride. That was a fun conversation, and it's been amazing to get to know you and all your good work.
Doctor, I just want to also pitch in and say that people should really read your book still. Your book has had a tremendous influence on my life. I look at the entire medical system at a completely different way. And I think it's God's hand that he has brought and assembled the team that we have leading our country right now, and that you're one of them. You're at the FDA. Describe the FDA to us now that you're on the inside.
Well, it's pretty amazing. The FDA regulates 20% of the U.S. economy, everything from food and the border where food comes across, to tobacco products, to medical devices, wearables, MRI machines, and drugs. So it's got a huge portfolio, and it's an amazing place.
So you came in quite bold. You had a big vision, make America healthy again.
Yes.
And you have been in office for how many months now?
5 months.
5 months. May I dare to ask, what have you accomplished so far?
Well, look, we're trying to stay on the mission that we have, which is to deliver more cures and meaningful treatments for the American people, healthier food for children, and to also safeguard the public against new threats like vaping addiction and other products that are out there. So we have a bold mandate. And I'll tell you, the cool thing about working for President Trump is he tells you to go bold, do what's right, and don't worry about the lobbyists and the corporate interests. And I don't think anybody has ever been in government with a charge like that. So it's a pretty wild time. We're doing a lot of stuff. We're going big. We've done, I think, 35 major reforms in the 5 months that I've been there. And we're going to keep on going.
Of the 35 major reforms, what is one that you'll never forget because you think is so significant?
Well, I think one that will, be long-lasting at the FDA is getting decisions out in weeks instead of the normal year-long process. Why does it take 10 years for a new medicine to come to market? We've got to challenge these deeply held assumptions. On the food side, we took an action within weeks of my getting there to remove 9 petroleum-based food dyes from the U.S. food supply. We're now going through an inventory of other chemicals. We've got to ask, are kids obese because they have a willpower problem or because we have engineered highly addictive foods that they eat? I think it is not their fault. I think this is something society has done and then told them, you've got these diagnoses, we need to drug you at scale. And it's wrong. It's unethical. It's dark sometimes when you look at what's happening. We also have a huge agenda on just modernizing the agency, reducing animal testing. Why are we testing drugs and other things on animals when we have sophisticated computational modeling that predicts toxicity better than animal studies? So if we do things well, we can modernize the agency, create more efficiency, and deliver more cures and meaningful treatments. That's one of my huge goals, is to deliver for the American people a cure or meaningful treatment for type 1 diabetes, for neurodegenerative debilitating conditions, for stage 1 and 2 cancer with certain types of cancer. And I'm referring to specific things that are in the pipeline that we are going to try to do everything we can to get a decision out on quick to try to hold to our commitment. A universal flu shot, so we don't guess every year what the strain is going to be. We don't do a good job guessing. Flu shot with long-term benefits, including against mutations that have yet to occur. And one of my personal goals is to see that we deliver a meaningful treatment for PTSD. We have about 8,000 veterans that die each year from suicide. That's more than the entire Iraq and Afghan wars over their entire spans. So the wars are over, but our men and women are still dying. We owe it to them to get them a meaningful treatment for PTSD and other major depressive disorders.
What do you think a meaningful treatment for PTSD looks like? Is it a medication? Is it the brain treatment center?
There's some early promising results that combine some of the things you're talking about. And I'm smiling a little bit because one of the things I'm learning in this job is we've got some commercial proprietary information, and I have to kind of be careful what I say because it moves markets. But it's really unbelievable what American invention has delivered for us. But then it gets held up in this giant bureaucracy. So one thing we're going to do is reduce the idle time in the approval process. When we do a clinical trial in medicine, why is it that after the trial's done, we submit a giant application with all sorts of information on how the drug is manufactured? We should be doing the lion's share of the review before the clinical trial is over. And then once the clinical trial is done, it just reads out the endpoints of the trial, the results quickly, and we can get a quick review.
So are you able to do that? Because you're the man in charge now.
So not only are we introducing this new program to get these decisions out quickly and to reduce the idle time, but we are going to prioritize drugs into that program that are in line with our administration's national priorities. We call it the National Priority Review Program. If your drug is going to be manufactured in the United States, which is a national security issue,
yes.
If you are going to equalize your drug price with the low price in the lowest wealthy nation overseas, what the president calls most favored nation status in drug pricing. We're the largest purchaser of drugs. We should have the lowest price of drugs for medications that are meeting a large unmet public health need. So we've been pretty clear that we're not going to be randomly selecting drugs for this new program. We're going to be selecting drugs and prioritizing them if they are in line with our national priorities. And it's not just that new program, it's also getting rid of the conflicts of interest. We took action recently, the boldest action in a generation, to reduce direct-to-consumer pharma ads, the endless TV ads of people singing and dancing that are misleading, the social media influencers who are paid by drug companies but disclosing no side effects, the online pharmacies that advertise in a Super Bowl, for example, and parade around benefits with no mention of potential risks. We are cracking down, and we have announced a major program that is going to rein in direct-to-consumer pharma ads. And I think you're going to see a pretty significant regulation, a significant change due to our regulation changes. So, for example, in the past, pharmaceutical ads were rare, and you'd watch TV and then, you'd hardly ever see a pharmaceutical ad. Well, it used to be that the FDA enforced its regulation that ads could not create a misleading impression, that it had to provide a fair balance of the pros and cons. And they would not allow you to put the side effects on another site, like a website. Well, there was very little enforcement. And what happened was the FDA went from sending 130 enforcement letters a year to almost nothing. In the Biden administration, in 2023, they sent one enforcement letter that entire year. Last year, it was 0. I sent recently 108 enforcement letters and 1,500 letters warning the industry that we are going to take down pharmaceutical ads with every action we can if they violate our regulations. So we walked into a mess when we came in. CDC was a mess. NIH was a mess. FDA was a mess. I found out that our foreign inspections were all announced of drug manufacturing sites. The FDA has inspectors, and we inspect them. So we were putting American companies through the ringer with surprise inspections, and foreign inspections, there were fewer, and we were doing them on a scheduled basis. Well, a scheduled inspection is no inspection. The companies were sending limos to pick up our U.S. FDA inspectors on the company's dime. It was so messed up. There were so many things broken. We found that the FDA had approved gene therapy to American cancer patients where they take the cells and send them to China and have Chinese labs edit the gene of American cells and then send it back to the U.S. and infuse it into American cancer patients. We shut it down when we learned about this. There was so much broken at the agency. The predecessor of mine said in the Biden administration that his number one goal was to fight misinformation. Well, my number one goal is not to censor Americans. It's to deliver more cures for the American public and healthier food for children.
I have friends that live in Europe that pay for prescription drugs that have been invented and manufactured, or at least originally in the United States. They pay less in Europe than in America for an American drug. Can you explain that to me?
It cannot be explained. The rest of the world has been laughing at the United States on some of this stuff. They negotiate good prices, and we end up funding the research and development of drugs for the world. And this president does not like to see Americans getting ripped off. And when you have a drug like a weight loss drug cost $1,000 in the United States and $88 in London.
Yes. Why? Why is that happening?
It's because, I think in part because these other countries have been smart in negotiating and the United States has allowed it to happen, but no longer. This is a massive priority. We are going to lower the price of drugs for everyday Americans. Take, for example, just the marketing costs of a pharma company. It's up to 20 to 25% of their budget.
Sure, they own half of our media.
They send billions of dollars into the media outlets, which may in part explain why you only heard one view when it came to pharmaceutical interventions related to COVID. You never once heard about the most common modifiable risk factor for COVID death, which is obesity. Never once. No one talked about it. Instead,
no, actually, they would tell us not to fat shame people, to be honest.
Yeah, they locked you in your home and the closed gyms and playgrounds for kids. Americans put on average 7 pounds. So when you look at these direct-to-consumer farm ads, for example, do you think they're talking about lifestyle changes before they talk about medications to treat conditions? So the 20 to 25% of a pharma company's budget that goes to marketing, we'd like to ask pharma companies to use that money to lower drug prices for everyday Americans.
Can you enforce that?
Sometimes we can win more bees with honey than fire. And so we've asked them to come to the table and work with us. It was successful with the removal of the 9 petroleum-based food dyes from the U.S. food supply. Mm-hmm. We invited them to the table. We said, look, we're all Americans. This is for our nation's children. We're doing that again in so many different areas. We're doing that with pharmaceutical companies. They spend over $10 billion on pharmaceutical ads. Imagine what that would do to lower drug prices for everyday Americans. And quite honestly, these ads are distorting the doctor-patient relationship. They're not presenting food as medicine ideas to treat conditions. It's supporting this pill-popping culture in American society. And so we took the most dramatic action to date to rein in pharmaceutical ads in the United States.
You mentioned the food dyes, and I'm curious, a very practical question. So if I go to the market now, I'm a mom, you ask me about my kids all the time.
Yeah.
Can I trust the food there? Are the food dyes out? Are most of them out? Like, what can a regular American infer from the action that the FDA has taken?
Yeah, so we're tracking all the companies that have committed to getting food dyes out of the food supply.
By when?
We've asked them to do it by the end of next year or the beginning of the following school year. They want a level playing field. They see the writing on the wall. They saw Republican and Democrat and independents show up in high numbers to vote for President Trump over this Make America Healthy Again agenda. They want to respond, and they've done it before. If you look at the campaign to reduce sugar in foods. Initially, the industry resisted. Then they saw the demand by the public, and then they started responding by advertising that they had low sugar. And then you all of a sudden had brands competing on how low the sugar was, that it was low in sugar or no sugar. So we want to see that healthy competition in the marketplace. We want to see more options. We want to see more options for infant formula. Moms want infant formula without corn syrup and seed oils. And it has been a regulatory failure, not a scientific failure, a failure of the FDA to allow many of these new products to come to market. So we have a lot of work to do, and we're going to keep going.
Yeah, I'd imagine it would take a long time to get the food companies to change their ways. I mean, you talk about making formula. I'm sure the moms that are listening now that just had their children are wondering is the formula safe, or is the formula going to be safe in 5 years when their child doesn't need formula anymore? At what pace can we expect these companies to work? And obviously, I totally recognize that it's incumbent upon us, those who are actually demanding the product, to make the demands that we want, right?
Yes.
We should just say, we will not buy this. It's not enough that you on the regulatory side are regulating it. We need to be aware, and we need to just stop purchasing. But at what point will we even have the inventory to purchase the alternative?
Yeah. Well, first of all, we're tracking the compliance of these companies that make pledges on our FDA website. I think the site is fda.gov/dies. We're going to hold companies accountable. We want to see this movement continue. We already saw another company, Mars, the candy maker, take the next step and remove titanium dioxide, a chemical in candy.
I cannot believe we've been eating that.
It's unbelievable. You wonder, who allowed this?
Who allowed this?
So the companies wrote kind of basically a regulation when there was industry capture of the FDA. The FDA has been captured by the industries it is supposed to regulate off and on throughout its history.
Disgusting.
Look at OxyContin. The regulator went to work for the Purdue Pharma after he approved OxyContin for chronic pain based on a 14-day study. It doesn't work for chronic. You can't say it works for chronic pain based on a 14-day study. And there are many examples like that at the FDA in the past. And I found some of the scientists there were demoralized. They know what's right. They want to go bold, and they haven't been able to. So we're going bold. Not only was titanium dioxide removed from the largest candy maker, but we also heard Sam's Club is going to no longer sell the top 40 most concerning chemicals in some of its foods. So we're seeing an excitement and enthusiasm, and that's just part of it. You can get rid of some of the bad stuff. We need to educate people. And so we're rewriting the broken food pyramid. For the first time in history, we're going to do it based on science, not let industry write it based on what they want you to buy. We're going to end the 50-year war on natural saturated fat. There's nothing wrong with natural saturated fat. We are going to talk about the types of grains you get, not just put grains and cereals on the food pyramid. If you have grains that are stripped of its fiber and chopped up and it functions like sugar in your body, it's different from a whole grain that you buy that comes out of the ground with good soil. We're talking about food as medicine and the microbiome. We're talking about soil and natural light exposure and microplastics. For the first time in the history of modern medicine are these issues coming to center stage. And the cool thing about the job, Marissa, is it's an intellectual feast with Dr. Oz and Jay Bhattacharya at NIH. And we talk every day along with Secretary Robert F. Kennedy about how we can advance the field. We don't have all the answers, but we are constantly talking about what the NIH can fund in terms of its research to understand the root causes of childhood diabetes, not just fund the Wuhan lab to mess around with coronaviruses. The NIH is funding amazing work on autism now, which affects 1 in 12 boys in California. I mean, these are real issues. They're going to start funding research on vaping products that we barely understand. And then we talk about the therapeutics for these conditions at FDA and the food supply. And then Mehmet Oz at Medicare and Medicaid talks about how to pay for good, healthy behaviors and pay for healthcare differently. So it's such an exciting time. And the teamwork is something I didn't expect to be so much
Yeah, I
much
wanted to
fun.
ask you about that because I remember your big frustration was that people just don't talk to each other, and so everybody just plays the blame game. And you got so is the CDC and the NIH and the FDA, are they all working together now? Are y'all meeting and discussing how to actually implement this and not just talk about it in a room and come up with ideas, but actually, get the better stuff out to the market? Are you collaborating?
We're collaborating, and it is so productive.
You just came out of one of those
We
meetings,
just
right?
had
That's
one of
why you're
those
so
meetings.
happy.
We just had one of those, and we also have a great time because it's so refreshing for the first time to not just talk about chemotherapy and surgery for cancer, but the environmental exposures in foods that
Yeah.
may cause cancer. We've got a rise in cancer in young people. Why is that? We need to talk about more than just the knife and the prescription pad. We've got to talk about food and environmental exposures. We are talking about school lunch programs, not just putting every 6-year-old on Ozempic. We're talking about the SNAP program, the Nutritional Assistance Program, and how that program now is being modified to no longer pay for junk food and sugary drinks. We're coming up with a definition for ultra-processed foods at the FDA. So we're going to be able to define it so we can start to inform programs in the United States that say, hey, I know the food supply is broken. We want to eat healthier, but how can you help us do that in a stepwise fashion? So it's an exciting time. There's a lot of cool stuff going on. And I think we have worked together in lockstep to try to come up with some meaningful answers for parents.
Can you give us some meaningful answers about autism?
So it's amazing what was already known by scientists in the corners of healthcare. They've been waving the flag saying, hey, there's a potential mechanism here, but they've been blown off. They've lived in the blind spots of modern medicine, and they've described a pathway that involves methylated folate. And it turns out that some kids with autism have an autoimmune reaction. That is, an antibody is blocking the receptor for methylated folate to go inside the brain. And that actually creates a deficiency of methylated folate. And so the good news is for those people with that deficiency that where it can be confirmed, there is a therapeutic that can actually help these kids. And some doctors have reported that 20-30% of kids who try this therapy, which is basically a methylated folate a carrier, that therapy helps these kids. And so we don't want to be involved in the practice of medicine, but we are bringing this research to center stage, and we are making therapeutics available. And it's just one of many pathways that have been identified. Mitochondrial injury and the work of Casey Means in describing mitochondrial damage appears to be another pathway. It's tied into insulin resistance, which, just to explain to your listenership, when you have so much sugar in your system, the cells can't handle it and they block the sugar transport from coming in. And they almost sort of become defective in being able to transport sugar in. And so that creates a problem in the entire body, in every organ, in the brain, in the heart, in the lung. Every single organ gets affected. And over time, that can create some blindness. It can create renal failure.
All from the microbiome in the stomach.
All from the mitochondrial damage and the lack of the ability to process sugar. And so we call it insulin resistance. Now, if you go to a college and you look at, say, 4 guys at college, if they're all fit and trim to a T, I bet you one of them has insulin resistance, but he doesn't even know it. And so this process is something that's happening and may not manifest in somebody until somebody is older. And so that's why Casey Means and others have started to sound the alarm on insulin resistance. So it's something tied to ultra-processed foods, and it's why we talk about ultra-processed foods. Ultra-processed foods are 65 to 70% of the calories in the diet of a child today in America, and we wonder why we have such high rates of chronic diseases. It's all connected.
Yeah, well, so many schools, because of their fear of allergies or anything, they require that you buy those bagged snacks, and most of them are just full of junk.
And some schools now are saying that your kid needs a snack list so those teachers know what snack to give them during the course of the day. Well, we didn't have snacks in school. Why are people snacking all day long?
Yeah.
And the snacks are like Oreo cookies and ding
Yeah.
dongs and whatever.
Yeah.
And look, it's a free country. You can eat whatever you want. But why are we promoting these ultra-processed foods? Why are taxpayer dollars buying these ultra-processed foods? The USDA spends $400 million a day on food, and a lot of it is bad food. So for the first time in U.S. history, we're seeing a synchronized effort by USDA, FDA, and Health and Human Services to change the way we buy food in the United States with taxpayer dollars.
Doctor, you mentioned autism. I want to ask you one more question about this because, as you know, there are many, many, many kids, especially in California, that have autism. I'm from California, so maybe that's why I know so many of them. They're probably watching this and they're wondering, how do they have access to this therapeutic? Is there a chance that a child that has autism could, I don't know if recover fully, but partially? Where can we send them if they're listening right now?
Well, there's going to be a lot more conversations about this. We're going to follow up. The NIH has funded a number of detailed studies to get more information, but the preliminary data basically says this. It says that there's a deficiency of methylated folate, which is a little different from folic acid, methylated folate inside the brain. And the transport of that methylated folate into the brain may be altered. It may be altered because of an autoimmune reaction triggered by who knows what. It could be due to mitochondrial dysfunction and insulin resistance, and it may be altered because of factors we've not yet understood. So there are doctors that say that they've treated some of these kids with the understanding they have a deficiency of methylated folate in a way that 20% or so of the kids have a pretty marked improvement. And another 30, 40% will have some measurable improvement, albeit small. And so are now appreciating there's probably multiple mechanisms, and we can identify maybe who might be a candidate for treatment by testing them for antibodies. So we want people to talk to a doctor who understands this body of literature. I think the medical community is soon going to learn up. They're going to catch up with the literature on this. We're not teaching them. We're bringing this research to the forefront. But I didn't hear a wink about what caused autism or how it could be treated in medical school or my entire 22-year career at Johns Hopkins. And yet 1 in 12 boys in California has autism. We have got to focus not just on what we think is scientifically interesting, but where there's a large unmet public health need. And autism is an example of where we put our heads together to say, here's what we know, here's what we don't know. The most important thing you can do as a doctor is to show humility and to say, I don't know, when that's the right answer. So we're putting together the information that is available, and we're saying we're going to keep going to try to learn more.
Well, we're following closely, and I know that you all are studying the vaccine schedules. Many parents are asking, why are there so many vaccinations for such little kids? I think it's up to 72 or 76 now. And so we look forward to hearing a report on that as well. I want to ask you about vape shops. I see them pop up everywhere. We talked about California, but I see them honestly all over the country. If anybody who is watching this that knows a teenage child is aware of the epidemic of vaping in our country. And I have to imagine that it's not good for kids. Is there anything that you guys can do on the FDA front to fight this prevalent epidemic of vaping with young kids?
This is another mess that we walked into. During the Biden administration, there was a mass proliferation of vape and smoke shops and gas stations selling illegal Chinese vaping products. These are products where we know there's distribution channels, we know where they're coming in through the ports. And we walked into this realizing, hey, what's going on here? These vape shops are popping up in every corner in America like mushrooms, and no one really understands them or talks about them. Or in the medical community, they don't even talk about what's in these vape shops. Turns out 85% of the vape products are illegal Chinese vape products. Some of them are designed to make kids addicted, with little video games or music players that are Bluetooth enabled as part of the vaping device to try to get kids to get on these products, stay on the products, and keep buying them.
And their ads are all over TikTok for vaping products.
It's everywhere. And just remember, there is no fruity flavored vape product that is legal in the United States. That's most of what's in these stores. There is no gummy product enhanced with 7-OH, which is an opioid, that is legal in the United States. And so you have all of these illegal products sold on every corner in America, in every neighborhood, and no one talked about it. No one understood it. And so we walked into a mess. And I quickly did some research. We were just in Chicago announcing the largest raid to date of illegal Chinese vaping products. I was doing some research on that greater Chicago area. They have 100 Starbucks in that area and 1,200 vape shops and smoke shops and other retailers selling these illegal vaping products. They're everywhere. They're dominating our society. They're around military bases. They're around college campuses and high schools. And one of the reasons why we were asleep at the wheel as a medical establishment is that the CDC put out a shoddy study that said that only 5% of young people are using vaping products. And they'll claim that that's the lowest level in a decade. What they don't tell you is the study survey was methodologically flawed. And you talk to any high school in America and they will tell you 30%, 40%, 50% of the kids in that school are regularly using these products. They're addictive. Kids go down the addictive pathway of lying, cheating, stealing, even from their own family and loved ones, of living a dual life. And there are tragic stories of kids that have gone to the hospital because of what's in these things. By the way, a third of them or more may have marijuana, which we know can lead to long-term psychoses and other mental health problems.
Especially when smoked during teenage years.
Especially, that's the key, because people think marijuana today is the marijuana of hippies. It's not. It's 10 to 20 times more potent. Many of it is much of the marijuana in the United States comes from marijuana farms, and these marijuana farms are sometimes owned by Chinese and even Mexican cartels operating those farms in the United States. So just because it's marijuana doesn't mean that it's not from a cartel. And what else is in those vaping devices? Formaldehyde sometimes, heavy metals like lead. So we have stories now of high schools that say once a month a kid goes to the hospital, sometimes in an ambulance, because of popcorn lung. We hear stories of individuals that have quit their lives, that have gone down a very dark road because they have to steal in order to get these vaping devices. We hear kids that are not attending class because they're in the boys' bathroom where they keep the vaping pens in the tiles in the ceiling because it's off the radar of the school. This is an epidemic in the United States, and nobody was paying attention to it until President Trump came into office. We are working with the Department of Justice and Attorney General Pam Bondi, Secretary Kennedy, and we are going all out. We're addressing the distribution networks. We're stopping port shopping, which is when these illegal products show up at the ports. The FDA inspectors would, under the Biden administration, they would look at them and say, oh, this is illegal, and put it back on the ship it came in on. And then the ship would go to another port. It's
and
called
just try
port
again
shopping.
with no consequence?
And yeah, that no consequences, and 100% of it came in. They were laughing at us. And so we're shutting down port shopping. We're addressing the distribution networks. There are raids that are being done on the retailers, and we're trying to educate young people about what's in these shops, and parents and houses of worship and school boards. Everybody needs to know this is an epidemic that has been in part a silent epidemic, but it's starting to destroy lives. And it's not just the vape products, it's opioids. You can walk into these vape shops and literally buy an opioid. It's called concentrated 7-OH or hydroxy or hydroxymetragenine. It goes by several names. We call it collectively 7-OH or hydroxy. It is 13 times more potent than morphine, and you can walk into one of these vape shops in America and buy it like a cup of coffee. We have got to wake up.
I'd imagine that anybody watching this would say, well, it's probably better to smoke a vape than a cigarette because cigarettes will cause lung cancer, and there's studies behind cigarettes and lung cancer. Are there serious studies that doctors are taking seriously about the dangers of whatever content there is inside the vape? Because I haven't heard about those. I've always heard, well, it's probably better than the alternative, or it's not that bad, or I'm buying it from a reputable source. I mean, I see people walking around with vapes all over the place.
I talk to doctors about what's in the vape stores, and they say, I don't know. I ask them, what % of high school kids are vaping? They say, I don't know. Talk to a high schooler, they'll tell you 20 to 50%. I ask the doctors, what % of the vape products have THC? They say, I don't know. It may be a third or more. I ask them, what are the other ingredients in these vape products? They say, I don't know. So it is true that if you are using an FDA-approved vape product, which is designed to transition people from combustible cigarettes to another form of nicotine delivery, where you're getting nicotine delivered in a way where we know what the chemicals are in that product, that it is less dangerous than combustible cigarettes. That is true. But what we are seeing is an epidemic of young kids vaping from scratch, not transitioning from cigarettes. And they're vaping with illegal products where we have no idea what those chemicals are. And when somebody comes into the hospital, we have no idea what's causing the lung damage.
And anybody could just open a vape shop and start selling illegal drugs to children?
They're popping up everywhere, yes. And there are drugs in there. The 7-hydroxy, you'll hear called a lot of different names. The real name for it is an opioid. It is an opioid, just like other opioids. And we don't want the fourth wave of the U.S. opioid epidemic to start right in front of our eyes. Every other wave of the opioid epidemic, we got caught blindsided. And so we want to be proactive and educate families, because ultimately we can do all the law enforcement in the world. But it's really the relationship between an individual and their loved ones that creates the mindset that there's potential harm here and that you don't want to risk going down the dark road of addiction. We all metabolically want to get fixated and addicted to something, and that's the body's natural tendency. But you want to be addicted to good things, healthy relationships, working out, hard work. And people, unfortunately, are going down this road, not because they're bad people, but because they were not aware of the incredible power that these substances have to suck them in.
I know you have giant goals. I'm curious whether AI can support the FDA, or do you feel like AI is unhealthy for the FDA, to use an appropriate analogy?
Well, AI is now being used in all sorts of industries, and it can do some powerful things. So at the FDA, we are using AI to help the scientists review the applications of these drugs and cures. And we want them to have this tool because some of the applications to the FDA are like 100,000 pages. So just organizing the applications, getting references that they can read of scientific articles that relate to the drug product, the formatting of the application tables with all the data. So AI serves a big purpose. So when I came to the FDA, I said, look, I want to start using AI. We can't be writing on stone tablets. We have processes at the FDA that are long outdated. They just don't fit some of the new stuff that we need to do. So
what was the response when you came in with technology into the FDA?
By and large, it was amazing. But, they feel like, hey, why are we not modernized? Why aren't we using a lot of this stuff? But I wanted to do things the right way. As a leader, and this is a general principle, if you go into any leadership role in your life, if you walk in strong-headed and just start barking orders, you'll fall flat on your face. But if you win over the individuals that you are leading and get their buy-in and listen to them, where oftentimes they have great insights, you're so much more effective.
Do you feel like you've won them over at the FDA? Are they with you? Do they support you? Or are they, I don't know, owned by pharmaceuticals? Or have their own
I feel
ways?
very supportive. I mean, of course, there's always it's a heterogeneous group. I don't feel that they're owned by the pharmaceutical
That's
companies
good.
because sometimes I've heard them say, "Oh, well, if we do this, the pharma company might be angry at us, or we have to consider that." And I've said, "Do what's right. Don't worry about what the
And they
pharma
smiled
company
after?
says." Yeah, I think they feel liberated.
Yeah.
Now, the reviewers are an amazing group of people, and we're
They're raising kids in this country too. That's why I can't imagine anybody who works for the FDA or any of these health departments. Why would they not want America to be healthy, right? Where are they going to go?
Yes, and we've got great talent, and a lot of new people are coming to the FDA. They've seen the energy that is a part of this big vision, and so a lot of scientists from top universities, Stanford and others, have come to the FDA. So it's an exciting time. But with the AI, I piloted the AI tool for the scientific reviewers with a group of scientists, and they were blown away. And one of them even told me, "Hey, this AI is doing in 6 minutes what would normally take me 2 to 3 days in doing just from organizing the applications." So then I set an aggressive goal. I said by June 30th, we want to have AI available agency-wide. And I'm happy to report that we delivered ahead of schedule and under budget. And we track it, and thousands of FDA reviewers are using it each day, and they don't have to. It's optional.
Well, thanks for saving us some money.
We're trying to be good stewards of taxpayer dollars.
Do you think there is a possibility that the cost of healthcare in America could go down?
The way we lower the price of healthcare in the United States is to improve the health of the population. We've got to stop with only being fixated with this myopic vision of this one payment reform or this one insurance reform. That's all important, and we need to discuss those issues. There's merits to them. But no one has been talking about the health of the population. Why do 40% of our nation's kids have a chronic disease? When a kid develops a chronic disease, we are creating a situation where they will go on to be high healthcare utilizers. So when someone says, the healthier food costs a little more money, I tell them it actually costs less when you factor in the price of insulin and knee replacements and renal failure. And so we've got to think broadly and holistically about healthcare.
Are you looking at alternatives for cancer as well? I've been hearing that there are some pretty straightforward, basic things that should have been done with cancer patients that are frankly shocking that nobody's heard about.
We've got to try new things. And so our cancer division at the FDA is one of the most innovative and creative areas in terms of how they regulate the products in that space. And so I'm really proud of what they're doing. And we're going to keep going. We had the first ever gene therapy in an infant. And so you can't do a clinical trial when you're dealing with a super rare disease. So the gene therapy was done with FDA authorization in a newborn, where they altered the gene of the newborn to protect the baby from a super rare condition that can cause death in the first few years of life. So that's the kind of new ways that we're thinking about cures and meaningful treatments. We have a new pathway called the plausible mechanism pathway, where if the scientific mechanism makes sense, we're going to go ahead and support that. I want to see more cures and meaningful treatments. I have been so frustrated as a doctor watching things held up in the bureaucracy. And why do we have this long process that takes 10 years for a new drug to come to market? If you had the cure for breast cancer, do we think it's reasonable to say, just let all these women die and then, we've got to give it the 10-year process? We've got to use gold standard science and common sense. And common sense says that President Trump had amazing instincts when he said he believes in right to try. And so I believe not just in the letter of right to try, but in the spirit of right to try.
So you think the gates of competition in the medical space are opening up?
Yes, they are. We're already seeing some of the capital markets get revived. They've been hit hard over the last 2.5 years. I think you're seeing new investment. I think you're seeing a new enthusiasm. Our new National Priority Review Program that gets decisions out in weeks is creating a lot of excitement. And so we're just going to keep going. We've got to try new things. We can't keep going down this broken road that we're on as a healthcare system, throwing good money after bad into a whack-a-mole treatment system that ignores root causes and stifles innovation with cures.
How realistic do you think it is that America would be able to produce its own medicine as opposed to giving it to China?
Look, that's a huge priority in this administration. So we're doing it step by step. We're creating massive incentives for manufacturing in the United States. We've got to do it. We got burned once during COVID. Never again should we be found shopping for drugs in China during a health emergency.
Does that mean that some of the regulations on American manufacturers need to be adjusted, lowered, or given faster? Or like, I know I sound very impatient. Where's the baby formula? Where's the clean food? But like, these are things that we are dealing with every single day. We're feeding our babies today. We are giving medicines to our elderly today. Like, how do we get there now, doctor?
Yes. No, I love your enthusiasm. It can't come soon enough. Like
I know.
we've been there 5 months. We've been working extremely hard, and we're going to keep delivering. So on the domestic manufacturing side, it's a long-term project. For 20, 30 years, people at the top were asleep at the wheel and let all of these national security issues, the manufacturing of antibiotics, of anesthetics to do general surgery, they let all of it move overseas to make a little more money. And so we're undoing 20 to 30 years of bad practices that created this dependence.
How realistic is it that by the end of your term, you'll be able to walk the streets of America and say, I see this and I made this happen?
Well, my goal is to create a new FDA that's modern, efficient, and focused on healthy food in a way that the next person will have so much pressure to not undo. So, for example, if we start getting into a rhythm where we are delivering on decisions quickly and facilitating more cures, for them to then say, no, we have to go back to a 10-year process, it would create a massive backlash. And so we've got to do it scientifically sound, not cutting any corners on safety. We've got to think about adverse events. But we need to use more common sense. For example, why do you have to apply 3 or 4 times when you submit a drug to the FDA? Would you apply for college after your freshman year, for your junior year or sophomore year, and then again for your junior, then again for your senior, and then once you're done again to get your diploma? No, you wouldn't do it. But that's what we do at the FDA. We're going to run more continuous trials. We're going to use cloud technology to watch the endpoints so the regulators look at studies as they're occurring. We've got to use AI. We've got to modernize, use tech, and we're monitoring drugs in the field now. We've never done that before at this scale. If a drug's approved by the FDA, we need to know immediately in the real world, is it working? Is it hurting people? Or is there a drug-drug interaction we didn't appreciate? With big data, we can do that now. So we're using big data to keep eyes on a drug the second we approve it. So we're not learning 15 years later that OxyContin may have killed hundreds of thousands of Americans. We're not learning 5 years later that the medicine called Vioxx killed up to 38,000 Americans. We need eyes on a drug immediately. And if we do it well, it can actually change the threshold to approve.
So I want to be fair and not put it all on you. So I would love for you to let us know, what can we do to support the FDA and make America healthy again? Is there one product that the PragerU viewers, last year we had 28 million unique visitors to our website. Let's get 20 million people to stop consuming a particular product that you think is really making us sick. What would it be that you would like us to just take straight out of our shopping cart?
Well, we're doing this big process to identify ultra-processed food with a definition. And once we do that, and we're open to input in that process, and maybe it's 6 months or a year from now, once we have that definition, we want to rally people around it to say, we're not telling you to ban it from society, but we're telling people to try to avoid it and eat foods that are not ultra-processed or highly processed. So that is it's never been done before. We talk colloquially about processed food or ultra-processed food, but it's never been defined.
Yeah.
Well, when you see something so ultra-processed, everybody knows it's not good for you. We're trying to create a category of food that is ultra-processed that we can all agree on, that we shouldn't be spending taxpayer dollars on. Now, processed food could just be cutting a cucumber or canning some olives. That's not what we're talking about. We're talking about ultra processed, when you see 30 ingredients on a little bar that you're going to eat
And you don't understand what you're reading.
and you don't understand what you're eating.
Okay, we're not going to eat those anymore, doctor.
And drink water.
Yeah.
And eat things that you cook and come from good soil and good farming, as opposed to things that are pre-made and pre-cooked.
And walk at least 20 minutes a day as if somebody is chasing after you.
Sure. Or as if you're chasing after somebody.
I like it. Thank you, doctor. Thanks for everything you're doing for us. We really appreciate you.
Thanks so much, Marissa. Great to be with you.